a day away from NBA free agency, and today, the deadline for James Harden to either opt in or decline his $35.6 million player option and become a free agent. 76ers president of basketball operations Daryl Morey says the franchise has an interest in bringing Harden back. All right, I got my NBA guys here, and Wendy, I got to get with you. Give us the very latest on the decision James Harden is thinking about right now.
Yeah, so right now the Sixers and Harden have been in conversations about what his future would look like and also about how a contract might be structured. Certainly he might have interest in looking and talking to other teams starting tomorrow, but the Sixers, obviously they could give a max contract. And if he doesn't opt into his contract by midnight tonight, I think there's a chance he's going to get a significant raise. But I do think there's a reason why there's some interest in having him look at keeping this option. Joel Embiid's contract increases by over 40% this year. His Supermax kicks in. And by the way, he earned it. He won the MVP.
Right.
His contract goes up by 40%. They have to sign Tyrese Maxey this offseason. I mean, they really should extend him. So the Sixers have to manage their money going forward. If Harden, you remember last year, Daryl Morey and Harden emerged on July 1st with this plan that nobody thought was going to happen, which included a pay cut that helped the Sixers. Let's see if they can negotiate something that keeps him here, but maybe keeps his salary below the max, even if it can go out for 4 years if they need to do that. So I think Harden is probably going to be back with the Sixers. The drama to me is how the contract might be structured.
So, again, it boils down to the years. And the one thing we've talked about, especially with James Harden, you look at it. Look, he put up 2 40-point performances in the playoffs. But here's the deal. Didn't score in the fourth quarter at all in games 5, 6, or 7. Those other 5 games, shot 25% from the field, averages 13 points. So if you're the Sixers, bringing him back, would it be a huge mistake?
Huge mistake depends on what the contract looks like, as Wendy's pointing out, right? Like they have to work out that deal, because if it is just 1 year or 1+ or pick up the option in 1, whatever it is, it's got to be short term, because at this point of his career, you don't want to get in too long of a contract with James Harden. Look, if you're Daryl Morey, you need to have another star-level player with Joel Embiid if you're trying to win a championship. There's really not a lot available to you. If you let him walk, what other options do you really have or legitimately have? You could try to get Fred VanVleet in some way possible, and him and Maxey in the backcourt. You could have that. But is that really something that sizzles? The East is kind of weird right now with the way things are going with some of the teams at the top, with the Bucks and some uncertainty there, new coach, the Celtics and a move that they made that took some heart out. So if you're the Sixers, you want to be in. I just don't know legs. I don't know about all in, because I don't know if I trust James Harden with that much guarantee down the road.
Well, I definitely don't trust him. And first of all, I think it's amazing that it took a perfect game to keep us from leading the show with James Harden. It was going to take something special overnight. But look, I look at it as a necessary evil. That's how I would describe it. They don't have a choice, right? You almost have to offer him what it's going to take. Now, look, if he were to opt out and leave and the Sixers did everything they could to re-sign him, then in a lot of ways the pressure is taken off of the front office, because that's just James Harden's decision. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be in Philadelphia. I think it's the best place for him to be, to have a chance to legitimately contend and win. And if you're Philadelphia right now, you're that close and you've got this kind of talent on your roster, and you can't really replace the talent of a James Harden, even though I believe it's mostly a regular season talent.
Yes.
He is still a great regular season player. He's going to help you position yourself probably in the top 3 in the Eastern Conference. You're going to have a high seed. Can you get past those other top teams in the East with James Harden and the way that he plays in pressure moments in the postseason? And not just last year. You could go back to the year before, the way that he played at the end of the season against Miami. You could go back to Houston and pick out some moments. This is a long track record of this.
Right.
So I don't believe that's going to change. But I just don't think Philly has much of a choice but to try to keep this thing together.
What's the ceiling then for the Sixers if they bring Harden back? Obviously, you have Embiid and getting past that second round.
Yeah, you can get there because they should have gotten there this year. Let's be honest. I mean, that series should have been won. You had a home game up 3-2 against the Celtics team that really was playing uninspired basketball. You could have won. Then Jason Tatum gets hot. He wins a game, and now you go to a game 7. So to me, the East is so weird, as I said, with what's at the top, that the opportunity is there for at least try to get to an NBA Finals, which they haven't done since 2001. So it would actually be a celebration just to get even that far. But to win a title, As you just said, Legs, I don't know if James Harden has that in his DNA to take you that
What's
far.
the ceiling, Lex?
I think if they're a second-round team again, I really do. Now, look, I know right now there's some uncertainty with Milwaukee and, with Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton, and we're going to kind of wait and see what happens there. If those guys leave, what do they replace them with? Still got Giannis. I'm a big believer in 34 in Milwaukee, and I actually think what Boston did is worth the risk, right? This team's been to 4 conference finals since Jason Tatum got there. They've been to 1 finals. They're taking a different approach. They're going to be able to play big without sacrificing offense by adding Porzingis. I like the move. I think Philadelphia still sits there, as we sit here today, behind both of those teams in the regular season, and then you've still got Miami.
So you got them 4th.
3rd or 4th, depending on – these teams aren't playing for the regular season, a lot of them. That's the problem. Like, in terms of seeding, Philadelphia could be in the top 2 or 3.
We can't judge this until
I'm talking about the series. They're going to have to play one of those teams in the second round. I wouldn't pick them to win that series.
The 8-time All-Star set to hit the open market tomorrow when free agency begins. After 3.5 seasons in Brooklyn, Irving, of course, was traded to the Mavericks, failed to make the playoffs for the first time in 4 years after tanking down the stretch. Here's our Ramona Shelburne on Kyrie.
He intends to take meetings when free agency opens. Now, they have widely held expectations that he returns to Dallas. Now, what's important to Kyrie Irving? From what I'm told, he wants to find a place where he can spend the rest of his career, a place that feels like home.
Okay, so Wendy, what's the market in your hearing for Kyrie Irving?
Here's the thing. There's not much of a market. The teams that have cap space, Orlando, Indiana, Detroit, Houston, these are not realistic landing spaces for Kyrie Irving. He can take meetings with teams that don't have space, and there can be negotiations on a sign and trade, but that would imply Dallas wants to say goodbye. They don't. The only team in this offseason where I thought Kyrie would have a chance to go that would be outside Dallas, really, would be L.A. And Rob Pelinka has taken out a billboard in Los Angeles that says, we are not going to be a cap space team. We are re-signing our players. There is no open market for Kyrie Irving. It doesn't mean he's not a desired player. There's just not avenues for him to go. I don't see where he's going besides Dallas. I think it's really, again, it comes down to, like with Harden, they need Harden. Harden needs them. Kyrie needs Dallas. Dallas needs Kyrie. It's just a matter of the terms of the deal.
So they're bidding against themselves?
Well, that's the thing. Like, honestly, I'm not seeing a whole lot of markets for a lot of players in this free agency. I'm at maybe 5 or 6 guys, other than like minimum players, who are honestly going to have real multiple bids.
So it begs the question here, Alan, how competitive and I love the Mavericks, how competitive will they be if they re-sign Kyrie? You look at it, he played 20 games with the Mavericks. They were 8-12. I know he averaged the most points in the fourth quarter, but you were 8-12, and you tanked and didn't make the playoffs.
Well, I mean, and you wonder, the idea of what he's putting out there about rest of his career and a place that feels like home. If that's just a message to the Dallas Mavericks, is make sure this is a 4-year deal. Make sure I'm getting long-term security here. And that's why he's talking about home and a place I can stay. Because what has he done? He's done a lot of bouncing around. And why has he bounced around? Because Boston had enough of him. Brooklyn had enough of him. I mean, Brooklyn would rather be irrelevant without Kevin Durant than deal with him. So he's in one situation in Dallas where they want him there, and he's trying to get as much length out of the contract as possible. But you don't want to do that because you got to worry about how the fit is with Luka.
Will they be competitive?
Listen, I think the sample size is too small so far. The one thing I do know is they're going to be a terrible defensive team on the perimeter. Is that good enough in this league to win consistently? There's no question the offensive talent is there. They're sort of like two guys, and I've described Tatum and Brown this way sometimes, independent of each other, their greatness, right? It's not like they're working together and they're doing things that involve the two of them to make things tough on defense. It's literally one guy at a time, each trip up the floor. That's kind of the way they play. But they've answered the question about having offense with Luka's on the bench. That was a major problem for this team. They've answered that with Kyrie. They didn't play enough together last year for me to definitively conclude, and based on who's around them, is this team good enough to contend with the two of them in the Western Conference? I'm very concerned about their defense and their leadership. But I got to see more of them offensively. They might be so good eventually they can make up for a lot of those things.